up, guys? Before we get into this next video, I wanted to let you know that there will be a meetup game at Lucky Chances Casino on February 8th starting at 2 p.m. I will be there with 3 other vloggers, including Just Christy B, P's and Q's Poker, and Andrew Locke. We'll be playing a fun and friendly 3-3 no-limit game. If you can, go to pokermeetups.com and register to put yourself on the list now. See you guys there. What's up, YouTube? Hanging out here with Charlie, who is building with his new blocks. Making some farms and planes and jets. Yeah. Gonna be going to Stone's Gambling Hall tonight to check out what their action is. I'm be searching for Mike Postle. Yeah,
I'm gonna make how we make that house together.
Okay, we will do that right after this video, okay? I'm gonna be searching for Mike Postle. We're gonna have to put him to the test. He probably won't be around, but I think it's worth the trip. Whoa! Before we jump into the video, I'd really appreciate it if you guys could go check out DJAF's podcast Poker Sessions, which he now has up on YouTube. You can start season 1. I'm sure you will enjoy it. I'll have a link above, so check that out. Subscribe, like his videos if you haven't had a chance to yet. All right, let's jump into the action here at Stone's. And we are off to try to find the GOAT, the best of all time, Mike Postle. About an hour drive to Stone's Gambling Hall. So we'll see you there.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Said time again we gotta go. Take one then I dash away from Popo. Yeah, snakes around my grass, they want my dodo. But I keep a 40, they don't know, no.
Alright, it is a little past 5 a.m. and we are on our way back to Stockton, California, which is about 50 minutes to an hour away from Stone's Gambling Hall. Just put in a 6-hour session at 1-3 no limit. The nice thing about the 1-3 here is that it is matched largest stack, so it plays, I'd say, much more like a 2-5 no limit. And a deep stack 2-5 no limit at that, as compared to like a 1-2 or 1-3 game. For example, as soon as I sat down, I bought in for $1,000 because there was another stack who had $1,000, and standard opens in this game are pretty frequently like $20, which is kind of your standard open at 2-5 as well. A little bit about my history with Stones. I've actually been there a couple of times now. This might be my like 3rd or 4th time. It's a beautiful place if you've never been. The card room is gorgeous. They have really nice decor. It kind of has this old saloon, gambling hall feel to it. And they know how to treat the customers right. Every time that I've been there, they're very accommodating. The food is excellent. You've never really heard anybody say anything bad about like the poker room and how it's run. In fact, it's probably the best I've ever been treated as a customer of a card room. Generally speaking, I feel like poker players aren't, valued assets when it comes to the casino industry, and it's quite the opposite here at Stone's Gambling Hall. So if you never had a chance, despite their recent snafus with Mike Postle, I'd say definitely check it out. Speaking of the live stream, I've actually played on it once before. As part of what I believe was the first vloggers game held by Andrew Nemi and Brad Owen. We had a ton of fun gambling it up, or at least some of us did. And if you want, you can check that out on their channel. I believe it is still up there. And I myself have dissected probably one of the most interesting hands I've ever played in my entire life on my YouTube channel as well. I'll have a link up above that you can go check out. I pretty much played about as ridiculous as I possibly could. The game played a bit tight by some of the players who played smaller stakes, and so I generally, wanted to have fun. I wanted to kind of ensure that it was an interesting watch for the viewers, so I pretty much blasted off like a monkey in outer space repeatedly. I think I ended up losing like 2K on the session, just playing like an absolute maniac. Didn't run good, so when you play like a maniac, you're gonna get picked off, and that I did. That was, like I said, a really fun experience. They treated us really well, and I have nothing bad to say about the place. Obviously, what occurred with Mike Postle is quite unfortunate. I have my opinions on whether he cheated or not. I think it's quite obvious, especially once you've combed through all of the hand histories and seen just how perfectly he played. like I said, I think if you're ever in the Sacramento area, it's a must stop. Without further ado, let's get into these hand histories because there are a number of them. So when we arrive at the card room, I'm actually met by I guess somebody that's watched the vlog before. His name's Michael. Really cool. We chatted up for like 5 or 10 minutes. Really nice guy. And it's one of the benefits of the vlog is that, you know, people recognize me and they'll speak to me, and I think that's really cool. It kind of gives you that sense that when you're not at home, you still feel at home, because obviously this is not a place I particularly play, but it's nice when someone that watches the channel can say what's up. So shout out to you, Michael, and I hope you did well. Anyway, so we get our seat at 1-3 no limit after waiting maybe like 20 minutes, and my immediate first reaction is it feels like a bunch of people who play poker, just the vibe that I get. And by that I mean guys who are, you know, decent enough, not making any mistakes, and are kind of grinding. You know, they're all looking at their phones, and yeah, just I don't get the best vibe. So my immediate thought is like, okay, I probably need a table change to get out of this game, because there are 3-1-3 no limit games going on. My first hand, when I sit down, I get dealt Queen Jack suited, and there's an open to I think like 21 after an under the gun limp. I am not going to be folding this in the hijack, so I call. We go 3 ways to a flop, which comes like ace deuce 3. Under the gun checks. The pre-flop opener c-bets. Obviously, I'm going to be folding. I just have no part of this. And anyway, he ends up stacking the under the gun guy. It's his ace king, and the under the gun guy says he has ace queen. Now, the very next hand, the player who got stacked with the ace queen, he leaves the table. So now the guy who opened is the big blind. I look down at ace jack offsuit, and I open to 15. The small blind calls, and now the player with the ace king from the previous hand calls from his big blind. The flop comes jack 6-6 rainbow, pretty much the nut flop for this hand. Goes check, check. I bet 25, which is a little bit over half pot, especially once the rake is taken out. The small blind folds, and now the big blind calls. At this point, I expect the big blind's hand to be comprised mostly of hands like jack 10, jack 9, Queen Jack, King Jack, maybe some pocket pairs like 7s, 8s, 9s, and then of course the occasional 6 like 6-5, 5-6, 5-7 suited. So now when the turn is a 5 and he checks, I decide to check it back, kind of pot control, make it look like I don't have much. Obviously, I run the risk of letting a queen, king, or ace peel, in which case maybe now he's going to think that I hit that card and I'm going to lose value when he has a hand like jack 10. But I don't really mind that. It kind of disguises the strength of my hand. Sometimes I feel like when you take a stab on a flop and then check back a turn, the out of position player almost always leaves the river nowadays. It's like just a lock. Anyway, so I check it back. The river is a 7, and now he leads out for 25 himself, which is a really small bet at this point. I think when he sizes down like this, he himself has some weaker jacks, maybe some hands, like I said, like 9s and 10s, that are just looking to get to a cheap showdown. And so obviously at this point, because of his sizing, I want to raise for value. I don't think I could raise too large, so I make it 75. I think when you play a hand like this, I'm kind of rivering like 7s full, or a hand like 9-8 suited for making it straight. Other than that, I'm not sure exactly what I'm repping. So I think I can get called pretty lightly here by a hand like King Jack. I don't think that players like to bet fold these scenarios, as I mentioned before in the vlog numerous times. Anyway, so I make it 75. He thinks for a bit and folds, so I'm expecting that he probably had the weakest part of his range, maybe hands like 8s or 9s, or just some floats like ace high. Anyway, so we take that one down, and we're up a little bit of money. At this point, I head over to the floor and let him know I want a table change, because I think within like half an hour, I'm kind of aware of just that this isn't particularly the game that I want to be in. So after getting up and going to the floor to ask for a table change, I come back to my seat and buy the button, looking down at ace 8 off, and there are, I believe, 3 limpers to me. I check my option. We go 4 ways to a flop, which comes 8-4-3 with 2 clubs. I like to lead in the field for $12, which I believe is about pot. Maybe it's a little bit over pot, given that they take the rake out. There is a fold from the early position limper, and now the aforementioned player with the ace king that when I first sat down, he calls. The player behind him folds. We go heads up to a turn, which is an offsuit ace, obviously gin. It's a great card for me. I think at this point I pretty much have like a lock on the hand, barring him slow playing some flop sets. And so now The question is this a card that's better for my range or his? And I feel like it's a card that's significantly better for his range. I think if I check to him, he might take some stabs here with ace-high flush draws. I do not have the ace of clubs. Similarly, I think if he has a hand like 9s or 10s, he's going to be betting here for value. I do run the risk of giving a free card if he does have a hand like, some whatever, king or queen high club draw. But anyway, I'm looking to try to kind of pile it in here on the turn for the 300 that he does have by check raising. I think if I bet here, he's just going to call, and we're left with his decision on the river where, if the clubs break off, I can bet he's just going to fold. So I'd much rather kind of build a pot here by check raising this turn. Unfortunately, he snap checks behind. When he snap checks behind, I think it's quite likely that he does in fact have a club draw. The river's an offsuit king, really of no consequence to me unless he has specifically king high flush draw. And now the question is whether to check or bet. Because of my inclination that he had flush draw, I want to be checking here, I believe, most of the time to kind of give his hands with no showdown value the opportunity to bluff. Obviously, I've already checked this turn. I'm checking this river. I'm just going to look pretty capped and weak. So I think, A, I can get into check raise here if he does have air, and B, if he does end up betting this river for value with like king queen or king jack of clubs or something like that, which he really shouldn't have given that he limped. I think I might even get looked up because it's just going to look like, what kind of hand do I play in this manner where I bet flop, check turn, and check river? So I check the river, and he snap checks behind. Again, obviously unfortunate. My hand obviously is good. So what did I miss out in value? I'd probably be betting maybe about 20 on this river. And if I'm betting 20, I think I'd be targeting exactly hands like 8-9, 8-7, maybe 8-6 offsuit. Just worse 8s on the flop. And I'm not entirely sure that like an 8 can call me on this board. Sure, maybe they might hero me, but I think it's close. I think the hand just plays better as a check on this river and hope that he either has missed clubs or he's river to king and is going to be betting it for value given how I play the hand. Anyway, at this point, after winning this hand, the floor comes over shortly thereafter, lets me know that there's an available seat in a different game. So we take our seat in this game, and we're hoping to go off to the races. As I'm getting myself situated at this new table, I witness a hand where under the gun limps. Next to act makes it to 20. There is a call on the cutoff or on the button by this lady. The under the gun limper calls as well. They go 3 ways to a flop, which comes queen, queen, 7 with 2 diamonds. It goes to check. The opener bets 35. The lady calls. 30 or 35. The lady calls. Under the gun limper folds. They go heads up to a turn, which is an offsuit deuce. Now he bets 65. And the lady thinks about it for a bit. Looks like she's thinking about raising. Ends up calling. The river is some brick, probably like an offsuit 6. Something that doesn't complete any straights or flushes, or any Broadway cards that would complete a hand like queen 10, queen jack, king queen. And now he checks, and she snap checks behind 2 kings. He tables ace queen offsuit for top trips, and I'm a bit bewildered. A couple of things about this hand. Number one, obviously you should be betting this river for value. I think her hand here is a lot of time going to be a hand like queen 10, queen jack, king queen, and he should be betting it for value. I mean, I guess if he thinks that's her hand and she's going to be betting it once checked to, he could try to get into check raise, but that's really just not my read of exactly what was going on. You can make the argument that if he thinks she has a flush draw, he should be checking here to let her bluff, but honestly, she is an older woman, and they just don't tend to bluff that much, so I really don't like that play. Also, in witnessing this play, it kind of gives me an idea of how this guy plays as far as just the polarized nature of his river bets. One of the things that I've mentioned before in this vlog is a lot of times you'll see when people are putting in big bets on the river, they literally just kind of have nuts or nothing. As silly as it sounds, people are kind of incapable of value betting hands that they ought to be. And so when you see somebody go for 3 streets, they're generally kind of repping the nuts or, again, just absolutely nothing. As we can see here, really, this is a hand he should be going for 3 streets of value with, but he doesn't. And I think that people are more apt to bet when they in fact have nothing and they know they can't win. For example, if they flopped enough flush draw and they bet, and on the river now they have like queen high and they know they can't win, now they're going to bet. Whereas if they flop trips, they're just way less likely to try to get 3 streets of value. So it kind of gives me an insight into how this guy plays. And, I guess the lesson from the hand is, if you're this player, you should be going for 3 streets of value in this hand. I think that she's oftentimes going to have a queen here, and you should be betting for value. that, that's a spot where if he bets 110, I don't expect her to ever fold kings. She's not supposed to have kings, really, but we see that she didn't even end up betting them. I think that if it goes bet, and now he checks his river, she can fold. She can bet kings, I think, for value here some of the time. Obviously, he could be playing some hands like Queen Jack and Queen 10 in this manner, which he bets twice for value. But it doesn't feel like you can go for 3 streets. I don't really blame her for checking back these 2 kings. But yeah, like I said, I think if he bets like $100 on the river here, he's going to get looked up by these 2 kings. And like I said, that's going to make up a big difference in your win rate long term. You really need to find these spots where you should be value betting, and ace queen is for sure a value bet in that spot. Now the very next hand, or the hand thereafter, from the ace queen, actually I think I ended up taking the big blind for that first hand where that ace queen happened. I don't remember exactly, but I believe it's almost the next hand. All I know is that I'm on the button this hand, so it's a hand or two later, or I took the big blind and then the small blind left. I'm not entirely sure, but that first ace queen hand happened, and now I'm on the button. Now there is an open from the ace queen guy under the gun to 10. And the first thing you should be thinking about is this alternating bet size pattern. I think that when he goes from opening to 20 with ace queen and now changes to 10, I think it's much more likely to just be a hand that he wants to play but doesn't feel like it's worth $20. Hands that are examples of that are maybe like 9-10 suited, 5-6 suited, ace-5 suited, hands that he knows that he wants to play but doesn't think are $20 hands. So now when it goes like 6 or 7 calls to me on the button, my immediate thought is this is a great spot to squeeze. But I look down at pocket threes, and that plan kind of goes out the window. Mostly being that pocket threes is going to be a hand that I want to go multi-way and try to flop a set and win a big pot. Also, more importantly, if I end up squeezing here to like $60 or $70 and somebody ends up like re-raising, so one of the first like $10 callers, I'm going to be in a spot where I just have to fold. This hand obviously does not play well in a situation that's a 4-bet, especially at these smaller stakes. And I'm going to be really mad at myself that I cost myself the opportunity to try to flop a set multi-way. If I end up having junk and I end up squeezing with it and now somebody limp re-raises or whatever, just, call re-raises, then I can easily fold because I just didn't have much of anything. Especially if I have a hand like ace-3 offsuit or something like that blocks some of the potentially more stronger hands like ace-king, ace-queen. Anyway, so I call, I think the small blind calls, and we go 7 or 8 ways to a flop, which comes Jack 7 deuce with 2 spades. He goes like check. A guy looks like he wants to bet, then asks if it's on him. They say like no, it's that guy, and then he's like wait, is it on me? It kind of like just goes back and forth. It's a little confusing. Ends up saying like okay, yeah, I check. Checks while putting me on the button. Feels like nobody has much of anything, and I don't think I need to be betting large here to be taking down this pot. Also, I can kind of see how people react. If I get called by one spot, I can kind of reevaluate certain turns and rivers where I think I'd be able to bluff them off. And it's quite possible that I can actually get called by worse here, right? Like some straight draws, like 10-9 for a gut shot, possibly some flush draws. So I size down to 30. Like I said, I don't think I have to bet too large. If I get check raise here, it's an easy fold. And if I bet too large, I'm kind of narrowing down exactly what I can get called by. Now it pretty much snap folds all the way through to the lady who is the second to last to call. There's only one player to my immediate right between her and I. She calls a 30. As I mentioned, she's the one that flatted the kings earlier. And now the player in between us folds. We go heads up to a turn, which is an offsuit queen. So the board is Jack 7 deuce with 2 spades, and the turn is an offsuit queen. She now goes to look at her hand, thinks for a bit, and checks. I think when she looks back at her hand, it's quite likely this card just did not hit her. The fact that she has to try to figure out exactly what she has makes it very unlikely that she has that strong of a hand. And so I decide that I'm going to be double barreling here. I decided to bet 75. I think the sizing is perfect to try to get her to fold exactly her second pairs, like 7-8, 7-9, 7-6. Especially since the second card, or especially since the turn is a queen, it is now a second overcard. Obviously, this is not a card that I should be hitting very often, but I don't think that this is something I have to particularly concern myself at the 1-3 stakes. It's not like I have to think about exactly what I'm repping. I think I'm much more concerned about her playing her own hand and the strength of her own hand. So I think if she has a hand like pocket eights or a 7, she's just going to be likely to be folding here to a double barrel. If she does in fact call, I think my plan is to bomb river, especially if it's not a spade. because I think that if she's going to call twice here, her most likely hands are going to be flush draws. Thankfully for us, she does fold for the $75, and we scoop up this nice pot with the pocket threes on the button when it was uncontested. Just didn't look like anybody wanted it. In this next hand, there's a limp under the gun from a guy who seems to be one of the more action players in the game. Folds to the lady in the cutoff. She calls. She limps as well. I look down at ace queen of hearts in the small blind. Obviously, I'm going to be opening and isolating, and I decide I'm going to make it $23, 20 more. So I make it 23, except that I don't. It turns out that I made it 18. I guess I grabbed the wrong amount of chips and missed an extra $5 chip. So I'm a little mad at myself that I didn't size up to the size that I want. I'm going to be out of position. Obviously with a good hand though, so I don't really mind. I'm going to be getting some action. The limper under the gun calls, and she calls as well. We go three ways to a flop, which comes 10, 8, 5, 2 clubs and a heart. We flop 2 overs in the backdoor nut flush draw. I think this is kind of a wet connected board that's going to be hitting their ranges much more than it does ours. I think if I'm going to be betting here, I've got to expect to double barrel quite frequently, especially turns that improve us, like a jack, a king, or a heart. Given how sticky I've seen this lady to be, I decided that this is not a spot for me to really be c-betting. I check under the gun, now bets 35, and she calls. Because of the presence of the heart on the board and me having backdoor hearts and the two of them being the two deeper players at the table, I decided to peel here out of position. I think my ace and my queen are live. Obviously, the backdoor hearts are live. And I guess some frequency of the time, ace queen high is good if they have some straight draws and flush draws, but it's just really going to be hard to navigate. I don't really love my play here, especially given the sizing. When he bets 35 into this pot of about like 45 or 50 after the rake is taken out, I think it's just too big. I think if he bets a little smaller, then I can peel, but for the sizing, I think it should just be a fold. Anyway, as I said, I do call, and the turn is the ace of spades. We make top pair. I expect this turn to check through a lot, and so I want to be charging the draws on the board. I think this is a great spot to be bet folding. Players to the stake aren't going to be raising this turn light, and so I think if I lead this turn and get raised, I can easily fold. I bet 75. Under the gun folds, lady folds, and we scoop up the pot. Yeah, I guess not much to say here. My turn bet of half pot I think is just about right, because I do want to get called by some worse hands, and I don't think I need to bet too large. So if I bet too large and get raised, it's obviously going to be a fold, and I'm just lighting money on fire. I think half pot does the trick. But as I said, I think this flop, I could probably just double barrel. Obviously, I'm going to have the range advantage. They're going to be fairly wide. But I think if we kind of double barrel, especially if we double barrel large on turns that aren't clubs, we're going to pick this pot up a lot. So as played, I just didn't really love it. I think my check call and flop is probably the worst of all the options. Now the lady limps once again, I think under the gun 2 or under the gun 3. I'm 2 seats to her left with pocket 9s. Obviously going to be isolating. I make it $20. Folds back to her and she calls. We go heads up to a flop, which comes 7-3-3 rainbow. She thinks for a bit and donks for $30. She's played a number of hands in some weird ways, like I mentioned the kings before. So I don't think that she necessarily has to just have like a 7 here or be weak. Obviously, I do think she could have hands like 10s or jacks that don't want overcards to come if I check it back. But obviously with pocket 9s, I will not be folding here. I call, and we're going to try to be evaluating some various runouts. The turn is an offsuit deuce, and now she checks. I think it's still possible that she plays some of her stronger hands like 10s or jacks in this manner. I don't think that my hand can go for 3 streets of value. And as such, because it's a 2 street value hand, I think I should be betting this turn. A, for protection to her overcard hands, which truthfully at that point, I really didn't think her hand was comprised of. I didn't think she had hands like ace king, ace queen, queen jack, king queen. I didn't think she'd be donking these into me. That's just not something that many people do. Obviously this board is pretty dry, and they don't really want to be check calling with that, so it's probably not the worst play in the world, especially if you're a woman, because I think you tend to get a lot of credit. Anyway, so yeah, I think I should be betting this turn for protection, for value. I'm very unlikely to be getting value on the river. Obviously, once I check back this turn, I also run the risk of a card like an ace or a king coming off, and once she checks here again, I'm just never really going to be getting value with the 9s. And so I think I should be betting this turn. Anyway, I check it back. The river's an offsuit jack, and she checks again. At this point, if I would be betting, I think I'd be targeting exactly a hand like pocket 8s, pocket 6s, or a 7, like ace 7, 7-6, 7-8. And I'm not entirely sure she's going to be calling with these. maybe for some smaller bets. Anyway, I check it back, and she rolls over the old Queen Jack offsuit. The pot's only like $100, but that's still $100 that I'd like to have. And obviously, if I bet this turn, I'd be having that $100. She's not going to be calling with Queen Jack offsuit. So yeah, as we can see, I should have been betting that turn for all the numerous reasons I've stated. And we're kind of punished for our lack of aggression for protecting this hand. Now there are a couple of limps from two of the looser players in the game. I look down at ace-jack offsuit in the cutoff, and I like to make it 25. I'm going to be sizing up with these hands that are kind of vulnerable, don't really want action, but don't mind it if they do, especially if people are going to be limp calling with some pretty dominated and poor hands. It folds back to them, and they both call. The first caller is a guy who had earlier called me out of the small blind. He actually tried limping out of the small blind when I raised with pocket fives. Then ends up saying like, oh, there's like $1,500 raise. Okay, I call. And he ends up checking down Jack 3 offsuit on like a Queen 10-9 flop, turn 10, river ace, and just showing down Jack high. Obviously poorly played A, calling a raise with Jack 3 offsuit, and more importantly, never taking a stab at this pot that I show zero interest in. I think if he bets his turn, I just have to fold. Or even the river, really. I guess the river, when it comes in ace, he thinks that hits me enough, and I'm going to be calling. But yeah, just really poorly played from beginning to end. So I think this guy's going to be playing a lot of hands. Anyway, we go 3 ways to a flop, which comes Jack 7-6 with 2 diamonds. Obviously, like I flop gin. The first limper, I think, has about 200 back, 250, and the second one has about 85. So I'm pretty much going broke with this hand versus the both of them, given how deep we are. They both check. I tank for a bit, trying to make it look like I'm weak, and bet 50. The first limper folds, and now the second one jams all in for like 35 more. Obviously, I'm not going to be folding. So the flop is Jack 7-6 with 2 diamonds. I assume that I'm mostly fading a diamond, or possibly some of the Jack's kickers like Jack 10, Queen Jack. The turn is a 6 pairing the board. The river is a queen, I believe, and he tables pocket deuces. Yeah, I don't really know what he's doing here. I think if he's going to be playing the hand in this way, he should just be limp jamming it against my $25 open. If he believes that my range here is comprised of a lot of like king, queen, ace, king, I still don't love the play because when he jams, I have to call for the 35 more, given the price that I'm getting, and then I'm still going to be like 25-30% to win this pot against pocket deuces. So yeah, I just don't love it. Like, even if you think that I have overcards in this instance, it's just a spot where, given how short he is, you just can't really be jamming. You got to be fit or fold, try to flop a set, or get it in pre-flop. The truth of the matter is, if he had limp jammed in this spot, it's quite possible I would have just folded ace jack offsuit. Doesn't really fare that well against like a limp jam range. I expect to have a lot of pocket pairs, maybe some ace king, ace queen. Yeah, there'll be some hands that I reverse dominate, like king jack suited or something like that. But I'm probably just gonna fold for like the extra, whatever, $85 with ace jack offsuit. So yeah, I just don't really know what he was doing, nor do I like what he ended up doing with the pocket deuces in this spot. Yeah, you have to be kind of aware of your situation. If you're playing short stack poker, then you really have to not be trying to flop sets with these small pocket pairs. You got to play tighter. Play hands that are just going to play post flop significantly better. That's bigger pairs like 8s plus, suited, connected, Broadway cards, big ace hands like ace king, ace queen. You can't really be playing pocket deuces when you're this short stacked. A dynamic has been established at the table in which the player to my immediate right, I think, has just been opening fairly wide. I haven't been punishing him. He's been opening to 15, 20, 20-something, 23 quite repeatedly. I think he's doing it really wide. And in my opinion, he's probably the only other player at the table who has some chops, kind of understands ranges and board textures and how to apply pressure. I look down at ace king after he opens to 15. Obviously, I want to be 3-betting. I think he's about 900 deep. I cover, and so I want to be isolating him and playing a pot in position with a hand that I think is going to obviously fare well post-flop, especially against his wide opening range. And we want to be, targeting his dominated hands that I don't think he's going to be folding to 3-bets. I make it 50, folds back to him, and he calls. We go heads up to a flop, which comes deuce 3-8 with 2 diamonds. He checks. And I don't have a diamond in my hand. I feel like if he's going to be calling 50 here pre, he should have some pairs. This is not like some wet board that I think he should be continuing on very often, but similarly, I don't think he's ever folding any pairs. I decided to check it back, which I think is quite weak and a mistake. I think because he's the only other competent player at the table, I think that when I check back this flop, it's going to look like I have exactly ace-king, and he's pretty much going to stab all turns that aren't Broadway cards, like an ace-king or queen. So anyway, I check it back. The turn, I think, is like a 9. Maybe brings like a double flush draw. He now bets 60. I just have no real part of it. My hand's going to look exactly like it is ace-king. I could try to raise here and rep God knows what. I don't really know. But I just don't like to play. I think when I check back this flop, I just have to give up and fold here. If I do call this turn, I've got to be willing to call the river. And that just becomes a really precarious instance in which I have no idea what he has for a hand, which is why I think I should be betting this flop. I could either be down betting to like a third pot or sizing up a little bit to like half pot, 2/3 pot, and going multiple streets here against what I believe is like a capped range. You know, if he ends up having some big hand here like pocket jacks, well, so be it. But we have to be willing to fire. Just 3-betting somebody and then giving up on it post-flop is rather weak. And I just really don't like the way I played this hand, especially given the fact that like I decided 3-bet and give up post-flop on a board where I don't make a pair. It's just a little silly. The next hand of note, which really isn't that interesting, but it does tell the story. I have pocket aces in a straddle pot. I believe under the gun straddles for 10. At least that's my understanding. I guess you could straddle to more than just double the big blind. I don't know exactly how it works there. But there's a straddle to 10. There's a guy who tries calling for 6, but then it's told it's 10. There's another flat on the button of 10. I'm in the small blind with pocket aces and elect to make it 65. Probably a little bit too large, but I kind of had a live read that the first limper was strong and we're going to be able to get it in. The straddler folds. Sure enough, the first limper rips it in there for about like $200, maybe a little bit more. I don't remember. The button folds. Obviously, I snap it off, and we hold against ace-king. Yeah, I guess nothing too interesting there, but we scooped that one for $200 to get ourselves back up to about 300 or 400. It kind of oscillated from up to 300, from up 300 to maybe up 100 to now being back up to about 300 or 400. In this next hand, I'm under the gun with ace queen of hearts and open to 20. Folds to the button, who was the player to my immediate right, the one that I said was the only one that I thought had chops. He has now moved across the table from being directly to my right to like 3 or 4 seats to my left. He calls on the button. When he calls on the button here, I think he's super wide. It's just a read I get. I feel like he wants to play pots with me. I feel like, because we're both deep, I have like 1,500 or something like that, and he has maybe like 12 or 1,300. I think he wants to mix it up. The blinds call as well, the small blind and the big blind, and we go 4 ways to a flop, which comes ace, deuce, 3 with 2 hearts. I have the queen of hearts. It was check, check. I like to check because I think the player on the button is going to spaz here. Just my read of the situation. I think he's going to be betting wide, especially once check 2. It looks a lot like we don't have much. You don't expect me to be checking an ace here. I think it's going to look a lot like I have a hand like 10s, jacks, queens. And if I check, I think it's going to give him the green light to go off for multiple barrels here. It's just kind of the read that I've gotten from noticing the hands that he played in other streets, where oftentimes when the pre-flop aggressor would check to him, he would start barreling. Anyway, sure enough, once I check, he does in fact bet 50, which is half pot. 50 into 80, a little bit more than half pot. The blinds fold. I tank for a bit, trying to make it look like I'm a little pained about, having to call here and look weak. And sure enough, I put in the call. As I mentioned, I do have the queen of hearts for the backup. The turn is like the jack of hearts completing the flush. It's not a card that I really hate unless he exactly has ace jack. Obviously, we're flush draws, but if he does in fact have that, it's kind of unfortunate for us. I think for a bit and check. He now does his whole card check. Thinks for a bit and bets 80. When he does his whole card check, I think it's quite likely that he has a hand like maybe top pair. Wants to see if he has a flush draw to back it up. Maybe some hands like pair plus gutters. They want to see if they've picked up a flush draw. Anyway, obviously I'm not going to be folding with the queen of hearts. This is one of the reasons also why I slow played this flop by checking, because I have the queen of hearts as backup. I think if I have a combination of ace queen that does not have the heart, I'm much more likely to be betting this flop, because now it's more likely that somebody can have a hard draw behind me. Anyway, so I call. The river is some small heart. We make the second nuts. The question is to bet or check. I think if I bet this river, it's going to look a lot like I have exactly what I have, like a flush, a hand that's like ace X with a heart, or possibly a hand like pocket kings or pocket queens with a heart. And so it feels like I've allowed him to be bluffing the previous streets. This is going to be a good bluffing card for him once again. So I like to keep the story straight. I check again to keep him from to fire once again. I think if he has a hand that has no showdown value, like a hand like maybe 5-6 for a gut shot, or like just a wide range of hands, right? Like let's say he just has like Queen Jack offsuit. This is going to be the spot for him to be bluffing. Also, if he has a hand like a 9 or 10 high flush, I think you should be betting it for value. So anyway, I check and he snap check backs. I table my hands and he kind of shoots up out of his chair all upset, like kind of grabs his cards. You'll see this sometimes from people who are like trying to pretend like they got sucked out on. So I say to him, I'm like, hey man, just table your hand then if I did get lucky. And he like shakes his head and he's like, yeah, you did. And he shows me what I believe was 9-3 of hearts. It's pretty dim in that poker room. It was hard for me to see exactly. But I think it was 9-3 hearts, which would be a pair and a flush draw on the flop. Maybe at like 9-4 of hearts or 9-5 of hearts for like a straight draw, flush draw. Anyway, we did in fact get lucky. And this kind of goes to show you why you have to think of your combinations to play in certain ways. As I mentioned, if I have some offsuit varieties that don't contain a heart, I think I'm much more likely to just start barreling on this flop. Whereas by having the Queen of Hearts back up, I can kind of slow play it and not be so concerned about like heart runoffs. Which, if I did have like ace king or ace queen without a heart, I should be betting for protection to not allow these backdoor hearts to come off. So yeah, we got a bit lucky here, but not before he got lucky himself. I think it's a little silly for him to be calling here pre-flop with 9-3 suited just because we're deep to try to either outplay me or make a hand. I think it's quite unlikely that he's going to be trying to outplay me. I think it's more just for the value of trying to make something with a garbage hand. I don't love the play. I think that if you're going to be calling here with 9-3 suited, what are you not going to be calling with? You're just going to be way too wide and in too many post-flop spots that are just kind of gross. Unless he thinks that he's going to be able to take the pot from me a lot if I bet flop and check turn. But anyway, yeah, it feels good to get lucky and suck out in a spot where somebody else sucked out and scooped this pot. Now, in this last hand of note, there is again a straddle to 6. There is an open to 31 from what I deem to be one of the tighter players in the game. He had once flop top set, kind of played it slow and cautiously. And then like when it was fairly the nuts, he was like afraid to show it until the other player showed his hand. Then there's another spot where he limped and folded ace queen when somebody opened large. The opener actually had aces, so he made a good fold, although he would have sucked out. So anyway, I think he's pretty tight. And when he opens to 31, this large sizing, I think he's going to have a really good hand. The button flats 31. This is a guy who has been losing a number of pots. He's the one that had the pocket aces in that hand, folded to somebody who had bluff jammed a straight and flush draw on this paired board. So I think he's pretty wide open here. I look down at the weapons of mass destruction in the small blind, pocket aces. Yeah, let's go. So the question is sizing. I think I'm going to be doing at least 4x given the fact that I'm out of position with an open and a call. I decide that because the pre-flop opener opened so large, I think he's going to have a strong value hand that he isn't going to be folding. So I decide to size up even larger. Hope that he has pocket kings or queens and is willing to get it in. I make it 150. Folds back to him. He thinks for a bit and calls, leaving himself with, I think, somewhere between 500 and 600. The player in the button thinks for a while and folds. So we have about 340 in there in the middle, going to a flop, which comes Jack 7-4 rainbow. Kind of the perfect flop. I think he might even fold jacks here pre-flop, given how tight he was and my sizing. I think that, yeah, it's just, I get a read that he doesn't have jacks. So I think it's way more likely that he has a hand like pocket queens, pocket kings, maybe pocket tens. So I like to bet a little under half pot, 150. Hope that either A, he's going to be jamming or just not going to be folding any of his pairs. And he goes deep into the tank. Starts doing some like facial movements and things, that gestures that essentially let me know that he does not in fact have a set of jacks. So at this point I'm praying his pocket kings and he's just not going to be folding. He thinks for a bit longer and then ends up saying, oh man, if you flop the set, would you be betting like this here? No, I think you'd be checking. So it feels a little weird. It feels like he's trying to give me like a story. And so I'm like, wow, did he actually flop a set of jacks? And he's going to be trying to slow play it. After thinking a bit, I kind of realized, like, no, he's just, like, everything he's doing is at face value. He himself is worried. He tanks for a bit longer and ends up folding. I say to him, like, wow, I thought you had pocket kings. And he's just like, well, what'd you have? I'm like, I thought you had kings. And somebody else is like, well, I guess that means he had aces. He kind of tanks, like, for a bit after that. And ends up saying that he had ace-king suited. And I was like, yeah, I had aces. And he's like, wow, really? Like, I don't believe you. And I'm like, yeah, well, there are 4 of them in the deck. So a little unfortunate it didn't come king high. Although if it came king high, I think I would have actually been a little bit worried because I did in fact put him squarely on a strong value hand, which in my opinion is kings or queens. Obviously ace king as well, but because I have two aces, it's just much less likely that that's going to be the case. So we scooped that pot. There's a couple of other pots where I flopped a set and won. Nothing too exciting or interesting. One of those being pocket nines. I opened, got two calls. Flop came like queen 9-4 with two hearts. IC bet a little over 2/3 pot. Got a call by a guy who had like 150 left. At this point, the pot's about 150. The turn's a jack of hearts, completing like some gut shots in the flush draw. I just know that I'm never check folding this spot. Sometimes he's gonna have a hand like king queen or queen 10 with a heart that's just never folding. So I put them all in for his like 150, 170 or whatever it was, and he folds. The player in between, who is also a vlog watcher, Aaron, thanks for saying what's up. It was really cool talking to you for the remainder of the evening. As I mentioned, it's always nice when you find a familiar face that you could talk to at the poker table. He said he would have turned a straight, so I'm happy that I bet this flop. Obviously, it's draw heavy. I should be betting, but I was thinking about checking and trying to get in a check raise, which obviously doesn't happen very often. And if it does check through, it would have been pretty brutal to let Aaron to drill that gut shot with my flop set. Anyway, yeah, just kind of ran good. These smaller stake games are pretty ABC, nothing too crazy. I think there are a couple mistakes that I did make, especially namely some spots where I should have been betting for protection, especially in situations where I don't have a 3-street value hand. And if that's the case, I should probably just be betting the turn to charge draws. So we did end up booking a $825 win, which is very nice for 1-3 no limit. Granted, I did buy in for $1,000, which isn't your standard 1-3 buy-in. But yeah, won almost that full buy-in amount, and had a really good time. Ordered some breakfast sliders that they had there. It was like scallions and jalapeno eggs with like chorizo sausage. It was delicious. Again, I have nothing bad to say. I love the room. If you're in the area, definitely check it out. Don't be deterred by, the GOAT, Mike Postle. He hasn't been around. I don't think he's been around them parts for a while, so you don't have to worry about him just, being all-knowing and turning on the God mode. Anyway, been home for a bit now, just finishing off these hand histories. I am very tired. It is 6:15 in the morning. Going to have to watch the kids in a couple hours. So thanks for watching and putting in another great session. Catch you guys later. Peace.
On my mind, yeah. Stacking money like 365.